I remember when I first met Randy like it was yesterday. I was just 24 years old, with a full heart and an empty future. He was 27, confident, successful, and so easy to talk to. We clicked from the very first conversation, one of those rare moments when time stands still and everything feels right. He had this warmth about him, a security that I had always craved. I was never the type to fall quickly, but with him, I didn't even try to fight it. It wasn't long before we started dating. At first, it felt like we were in a perfect bubble. Everything was new, exciting, and full of possibilities. He had a way of making me feel special, like I was the only one in the room. He was ambitious and passionate about his work. Randy owned his own trucking company, and while the hours were long, I admired his determination. Within a year, we were inseparable. I'd never been more certain of anything in my life. So, when he proposed to me on a quiet, starry night by the lake, I couldn't say no. The wedding was a beautiful blur of happiness, friends, family, and promises. We both felt unstoppable. The first year of our marriage was a dream. We traveled, laughed, spent late nights together, and shared everything, our hopes, our fears, our favorite memories. There was no place I'd rather be than next to him. He made me feel seen, heard, understood. We still hung out with our friends, drank too much wine at dinner, and danced under the stars like we were teenagers again. But life was changing. Slowly, in the background, I saw Randy's focus shifting. His company was growing, and with it, the demands on his time increased. He would leave early in the mornings, barely home for dinner, and when he was home, his mind was elsewhere, on the trucks, the drivers, the logistics. There was always something. I told myself that it was just a phase, that things would go back to normal, but they didn't. I always believed in forever. And when I married Randy, I thought that we'd never have to face the darker sides of life. We bought a house, had a beautiful baby boy who made our world feel more complete. His name was James, and from the moment I held him, my heart grew 100 times. He was our little miracle, the piece of our love we could hold in our arms. But somehow, between diaper changes and midnight feedings, the cracks in our relationship started to widen. Randy was still there, but not really there. We drifted. I started to feel like I was living alone in a shared space. The intimate moments, the spark that once held us together, was now missing. I had no idea how to bring it back. Maybe it was the exhaustion of new motherhood, or maybe it was the loneliness. I began to question everything. As the months passed, the routine became unbearable. Randy's obsession with his business only grew, and I found myself stuck at home with James, waiting for moments when he could be present. The moments never came. I watched him leave early in the mornings, kiss James on the forehead as if it was a formality, and then disappear into the whirlwind of his trucks, the schedules, the endless calls. When he did come home late at night, he was tired, so tired that he barely looked up from his phone or his laptop, which was always glowing with the next task to handle. I tried to tell myself that this was just a phase, that his business was demanding more from him now that it was expanding. But deep down, I could feel the emptiness between us growing. It wasn't just about the hours, it was about the absence of laughter, of simple conversations, of touch. There was no longer time for us to be us. And so, I filled the silence with other things. The dishes, the laundry, the cleaning, they all became my new companions. I held James in my arms every day, but I also held a growing sense of frustration and loneliness in my chest. I used to be able to tell Randy everything, the little things, the big things, but now, I was left to navigate it all alone. The evenings stretched on endlessly. I watched as other families seemed to have it all figured out, while I was stuck in a loop of monotony, just trying to survive until the next day. I missed him. I missed the connection we once had. I wanted to scream, to make him understand how much I needed him, how much we needed him. But what would that do? Would he even hear me? Or would he just apologize and promise to change, only for nothing to really change at all? I became quieter, less hopeful. Randy seemed farther away every day, and I didn't know how to bridge the gap. I started wondering if this was just the way things were now, if love, the kind we once had, was something that simply faded when life got in the way. And that's when Gaby started showing up more. She had always been my escape, my friend who didn't have the weight of a family or a business to tie her down. But now, her visits felt like a lifeline. She was free, carefree, even, and I found myself leaning on her more than I ever had before. She never judged me, never asked me hard questions. She simply listened, and that was enough. But even in her presence, I knew I was slowly losing something. Something that once was the core of my relationship with Randy. I didn't know how to get it back. I began spending more time with Gaby, my best friend. She was the opposite of me, wild, free-spirited, and unapologetically herself. She had always been there for me, but recently, our friendship had taken on a new dynamic. Gaby was open about everything, her thoughts, her feelings, and her choices. As time passed, I found myself more drawn to Gaby's ideas. She wasn't just a friend, she was a voice of rebellion in my life, pushing me to consider what I had never dared before. Randy and I had grown distant, and the thought of venturing outside the box began to seduce me. I couldn't bring myself to talk to Randy about it. I was terrified of how he would react. So, I kept it to myself. But the longing for something, anything, was beginning to burn inside me. Gaby continued to empower me, telling me to embrace my desires and not let guilt or shame hold me back. It wasn't long before I started thinking about what Gaby had suggested more seriously. At first, the idea of an open relationship had felt foreign, almost ridiculous, something that happened in movies or on talk shows, a distant concept that had no place in my life. But as the days wore on, and the distance between Randy and me only grew wider, I couldn't help but wonder if it might be the key to something I hadn't even realized I needed. Gaby was persistent, always nudging me to open my mind. "You've been so caught up in trying to hold everything together, Lynn," she would say, "but what if the answer is letting go? What if you stopped trying to control everything and just gave yourself the freedom to experience life in a different way?" Her words haunted me. It wasn't that I didn't love Randy anymore, God, no. I still loved him with a part of me that hadn't quite disappeared. But there was this gnawing feeling, this deep ache that no amount of effort on my part seemed to be able to fix. Randy wasn't really there anymore, not in the way I needed him to be. I was slipping further away from him, and I couldn't tell if it was just a phase or something more permanent. I didn't want to betray him, but at the same time, I felt like I was already living a lie. The silence between us was louder than any conversation we could have had. Maybe an open relationship could be the answer, a way to explore the parts of myself that had been buried under the weight of responsibility, motherhood, and a marriage that was slowly unraveling. I found myself thinking about it at night, when I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling. The idea seemed both exhilarating and terrifying. But maybe that was the point. It was a chance to break free from the suffocating routine and rediscover who I was, outside of being a wife and a mother. I hadn't yet voiced any of this to Randy, not even a hint of it. How could I? How could I put that kind of weight on him, when he was already so distant and preoccupied with his work? And what if he rejected it completely? What if it made things worse? I didn't know the answers, but the longer I stayed silent, the more desperate the question became. I started reaching out to other people, strangers at first, then people I knew only on the surface. I craved attention, validation, something to fill the emptiness I had been living with for months. The conversations were harmless at first, nothing more than small flirtations or playful messages. But with each new interaction, I felt myself waking up in a way I hadn't in years. I was seen, not as a mother, a wife, but as me, Lynn, with desires, with needs that had been ignored for too long. I began to wonder, what if this was the first step? What if breaking the rules, stepping outside of what was expected, was the way I could finally feel alive again? The first time it happened, I didn't know what I was doing. I don't even know why I let it happen, but the moment I did, I couldn't take it back. It was just supposed to be a drink with Navy, something casual, something to get me out of my head for a little while. But that night, everything felt different. The atmosphere in the bar was electric, everyone laughing, chatting, living without any care in the world. And then there he was, someone who looked at me as though I wasn't invisible. We started talking. Flirting, even. It was harmless at first, a way to fill the space that had been left between Randy and me. But something inside me shifted. The attention felt like a breath of fresh air, something that had been suffocated for so long. I hadn't felt seen in months, not really, not in the way I needed. And for that one night, with him, I felt like I mattered. Navy was the one who pushed me forward, egging me on in her own carefree, nonchalant way. "You deserve to have fun, Lynn," she'd whispered. "Why not? Randy isn't giving you what you need. Don't be afraid to take what's yours." I should have stopped it. I should have walked away. But I didn't. The feeling of being desired, of being wanted, was intoxicating. I wanted to feel free again, like the person I had been before all the responsibility weighed me down. The next morning, the guilt was suffocating, but it didn't stop me. In fact, it made me crave it more. I was already slipping down a path I couldn't come back from, and the thrill of sneaking around, the secrecy, it gave me a rush I hadn't felt in years. I began to lie more, little things at first, innocuous details about where I was or who I was with. It wasn't until I noticed how easily the lies came to me that I realized I had crossed a line. Randy didn't question me. He was still distant, too absorbed in his world of trucks and deadlines to notice the subtle changes. But I knew. I knew that every time I stepped outside the boundaries I had once held sacred, I was leaving a part of myself behind. Yet, the more I leaned into this new life, the more I started to lose touch with what was real. I couldn't talk to Randy about it, couldn't admit that I was already looking for something beyond what we had. Instead, I buried myself deeper in my new freedom, drowning in the excitement of late-night outings and stolen moments. It was no longer about escaping my loneliness. It became a way to silence the growing emptiness inside me, a way to avoid facing what was falling apart at home. But with every night I spent with someone else, every glance and touch I let myself indulge in, I felt myself drifting further from Randy, and from who I was before all of this. I couldn't see it then, but now, looking back, I know that I was already in too deep. The day Randy found out felt like a slow-motion crash, like everything I had been trying to avoid for so long was finally coming to a head, and I couldn't escape it. There had been no build-up, no warning signs, no last-ditch attempt to salvage anything. I had kept myself in a fragile bubble, trying to pretend I was still living the life I had once cherished. But the truth was like a storm, and it didn't care about my lies or my attempts to keep everything together. It started with a simple question. Randy came home earlier than usual that day. He looked tired, as always, but there was something different in his eyes, something almost searching. I didn't know it then, but he already knew. He had seen the signs, felt the distance, the coldness between us. He could feel my absence even when I was physically there. And that, I suppose, was the breaking point. He asked me quietly, almost cautiously, "Lynn, where were you last night?" His voice was soft, but there was an edge to it, like he was bracing for something he wasn't sure he could handle. I froze. The guilt flooded me all at once, suffocating me. I had gotten so used to hiding the truth, but in that moment, there was nowhere to hide anymore. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. I couldn't look him in the eye. I wanted to tell him everything, to scream it out and make him understand how far I had fallen, but I couldn't bring myself to say the words. I took a breath, a desperate, shaky breath, and tried to form a sentence. I was with a friend. Navy and I went out. It was a half-truth, but not the one he needed to hear. The lie hung in the air between us, and I could see the way he stiffened, how he could feel something wasn't right. There was a long silence. Randy's eyes searched mine, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt like he was seeing me, really seeing me. Not just as his wife or the mother of his child, but as me, broken, lost, and desperate for something I wasn't sure how to find. And then, in a voice so quiet it almost sounded like a whisper, he said, "I know." The words hit me like a punch. I could hear the hurt in them, the quiet devastation that I had ignored for so long. He had known. He had known something wasn't right long before I had even admitted it to myself. He had been watching me slip away, helpless to stop it. I felt sick. The room spun around me as reality came crashing in. He wasn't angry, not at first. He was just sad. So incredibly, heartbreakingly sad. And in that sadness, I saw everything I had destroyed, the trust, the love, the future we had once dreamed of. "I don't even know who you are anymore, Lynn," Randy continued, his voice breaking. "You've been so distant. I've really tried to be here, but it's like you're gone. You're not even the same person I married." I wanted to apologize, to explain myself, to beg for his forgiveness. But I knew the words wouldn't matter. They couldn't fix what I had done. How could they? How could I fix the years of neglect, the lies, the selfishness that had driven us apart? "I'm sorry," I whispered, the words falling so easily from my lips, but I knew they weren't enough. They would never be enough. He took a step back, his face a mix of hurt and disbelief. You don't even know what that means anymore, do you? He was shaking his head, as if trying to wake me up from whatever dream I had been living in. I opened my mouth to speak, but no sound came out. I wanted to say everything, explain how lost I had felt, how desperate I had been to fill the emptiness inside me, how I had been so afraid of facing the truth that I ran from it. But the words wouldn't come. I can't do this, Lynn, Randy said finally, his voice so soft, yet so final. I can't be with someone who doesn't even know who they are anymore. I love you, but I can't live like this. Not like this. And just like that, it was over. The man who had once been my everything, the one who had promised me forever, who had made me believe that love could conquer anything, was gone. We both were. We had slipped so far away from each other that there was no way back. I collapsed onto the couch, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I didn't know what I was supposed to feel. Shock? Relief? Guilt? I felt all of it, like a tidal wave crashing over me, and it left me gasping for air. My heart broke as I looked at him, at the man I had once loved with every part of me, and saw how far we had drifted. I could feel the finality in the air, like a door slamming shut on a life that had once felt so certain, so secure. I'm sorry, Randy, I whispered again, but this time, it felt empty. It was too late. The damage had been done, and there was no turning back. He walked out, and I heard the door close behind him. And for the first time in what felt like forever, the silence between us was deafening. It's hard to find the words to describe how it feels to walk away from the life you thought you would have forever. I never imagined I would be here, standing on the other side of everything I had worked so hard to build. But here I am, in a new place, with nothing but my son, James, and the weight of every decision I've made hanging around my neck. Randy and I are no longer a we. We are two people, drifting in different directions, broken in ways I can't even begin to fix. I tried to fight it, tried to hold on to the love we had once shared, but somewhere along the way, we both lost ourselves. I lost myself first, and he followed soon after. But what do you do when the love you once believed in starts slipping through your fingers, and all you're left with are the echoes of who you used to be? I didn't have a plan when I left him. I didn't even know if leaving was the right thing to do. But I couldn't stay, not when every piece of me felt shattered and lost. The guilt of what I had done to him, to us, sat like a stone in my chest, heavy and unyielding. I could see the look in Randy's eyes, the hurt, the confusion, and it tore me apart. He didn't deserve this. Neither did I. But we had both fallen into something neither of us knew how to climb out of. When I left, it was with nothing but a bag packed with clothes for James and me. I walked away from our home, from everything that had once been mine, and I felt the sting of that finality with every step. The house we had dreamed of together, the plans we had made, gone, just like that. It didn't matter that we were still married, that I had given birth to his child, that we had shared so many years together. The reality was that we had grown apart. I had chosen to walk away, to seek something I couldn't name, and now, I had to live with the consequences of that. I moved in with Navy. She was there, waiting for me with open arms, no questions asked. I couldn't have done it without her. She didn't judge me, didn't ask me to explain myself, though I know she could see the guilt in my eyes, could feel the weight of the decisions I had made. But she was there, always the person who didn't need to fix me, but who just accepted me for who I was in that moment. It was strange, living with her. Strange and freeing, and suffocating all at once. I had thought I would feel relief, that somehow, starting over would clear my mind, give me a new sense of purpose. But it didn't. It didn't take the guilt away. I woke up every day with the same empty feeling, as though the pieces of me I had lost were scattered somewhere out of reach. Every time I held James in my arms, I could feel the weight of the past pressing down on me. I was trying to rebuild, trying to be strong for him, but the cracks in my heart were too deep. Gaby didn't try to fill those cracks. She just gave me space to breathe, space to figure out who I was without all the roles I had once defined myself by. But in that space, I found nothing but the echoes of the person I used to be, the woman who was so sure of her life, her marriage, her future. The woman who now didn't know where she was going or what she wanted. The woman who had hurt the one person she had once promised to love forever. Some days, I wanted to call Randy, beg him to take me back, to fix it all. I thought about James, about the life we had promised him. But I knew I couldn't. I had already crossed a line, and there was no going back from it. It wasn't just about what I had done, it was about what we had both let slip away. We had stopped seeing each other, stopped really listening to each other. And I couldn't erase that. I couldn't erase the things I had done, the lies, the distance, the disconnection. I couldn't erase the fact that I had hurt him beyond what words could fix. But I wasn't the only one hurting. Randy was, too. I knew that. And I would have to live with that forever. The guilt of what I had done to him, to us, was something that would never leave me. But I had to keep moving forward, for James, for me. I had to build something new, even if it meant starting from nothing. So, here I am. A mother without a partner, trying to find my way. Some days, it feels like I'm drowning in my choices, in the pain of what I've lost. But some days, I see glimmers of hope. I see the small, joyful moments with James, his laughter filling up the silence that used to be so suffocating. And I know that, somehow, I'll keep going. The road ahead is unclear, and I don't know what comes next. But for the first time in a long time, I'm learning to be okay with that. I have no idea where this new path will lead me, but I know one thing for sure, I will never stop moving forward. Because I have to. For me. For James. And, somehow, for the woman I was before all of this, before I lost myself, before I let it all fall apart.
If you like this story and felt connected, please subscribe. Thanks for watching Gaby's cheating stories. See you on the next one.